The Supreme Court has adjourned hearing to February 22, the case between 3 All Progressives Congress states and the federal government on the legality of the old Naira notes.
Although the court did not formally extend its earlier order stopping the federal government from barring people from spending the old Naira notes, the court insisted that its earlier order remained in force.
Well, the order was premised on the hearing of a motion on notice, which has yet to be heard due to the application by states to join the case. Well, in applying to be joined as respondents, the 2 opposition People's Democratic Party states of Edo and Bayelsa told the panel of 7 justices of the Apex Court that they're in support of the cashless policy regime of the federal government.
However, 6 other states of the governing All Progressives Congress, Lagos, Cross River, Ogun, Ekiti, Ondo, and Sokoto joined their counterparts, Kaduna, Kogi, and Zamfara in the legal battle against their ruling federal government. Now, to make sense of the developing story, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Edoba Omoregie, joins us now to make a better understanding of what we're dealing with. Now, it's a big problem now, and many people are already incensed by this. And we saw the very senior lawyers asking Nigerians to be patient. But again, let's look at the legal implication of what's gone down in the last few days.
Well, you know, this is a very serious matter. It's already pending before the Supreme Court. Advisedly, we are not supposed to be making too much comment about the substance of the case, but there's a subsisting order of court. And so if you permit me, I will limit myself to that order of court, you know, which is made ex parte, meaning that the other side was not heard. And the whole idea is to keep the status quo, that is the state of affairs, before 10th of February.
Which is?
You know, to pause it, so that there will be no further action. Because, of course, the notice was that by February 10th, all currencies listed will cease to be legal tender. So by the order of the court, every policy decision in that regard has to be paused. That's the whole essence of that order.
Okay.
Sorry, let me come in here. And it looks like a reprieve for the bulk percentage of Nigerians. But, well, our correspondents also went to town, and I'm quite sure you must have also heard that some people have started rejecting the old Naira note. In other words, it looks as if the Supreme Court's interim injunction is being flouted.
Well, that's well, people, you know, you can't force anybody to accept money from you, you know, assuming that, you know. So, but bottom line is that we expect that the federal government should take necessary action, which is to deploy, because you know, if you don't have the old notes circulating, you know, it will be difficult for the order of court to be fully implemented. So of course you know that the old notes have been mopped up, you know, as it were. So it's now for the CBN to comply by, you know, reintroducing the old notes into circulation. So it's just as simple as that.
Well, you say it's as simple as that. We've spoken to, you know, a few lawyers on this show, and they continue to say, look, the action of the CBN to extend, or not to extend actually, from February 10 amounts to contempt. Well, the CBN is not a party in this suit before the Supreme Court. So now when the Supreme Court, you know, carries out the interim injunction, is it to the federal government, or is it asking the Central Bank of Nigeria through the federal government to abide by its own rules?
If any comment
is there a contempt at all?
No. It's still going back to the substantive issue.
Right.
You know, and I will avoid that. But what is clear is that an order has been made against the named parties on record. That is the Attorney General, who's the alter ego of the federal government, and all the agents of the federal government, including the CBN, are bound, you know, to comply. So we are not in a Jankara environment. So anybody that acts contrary, you know, will be in contravention of the order of court. Yeah,
but the federal government has not come out clearly, or the central bank either, to say...
The Attorney General said that the federal government will comply.
Well, yes, that's what he said. But right now, I mean, it begs the question. Okay,
and that ends the issue.
Let's come to the issue. So let me just
it didn't end it. Yeah. It didn't. Because after Mr. Malami said the federal government was going to comply, what we then saw was a supposed memo from the central bank asking the banks to stop the, stop receiving the old Naira notes.
Well,
so in other words, it amounts to what Ngozi has highlighted by saying that it looks as if people have flouted the interim injunction of the Supreme Court.
There's no doubt that we're Nigerians. We are saying that there seem to be mixed messages coming from the CBN. I saw one now seeking to implement, the provisions on 22.3, which is to the effect that after the date fixed for the notes to be legal tender ends, whatever money you have to take not to the bank, but to the CBN. I saw that notice out. Many persons will frown at that. I will frown at that because you are not supposed to be taking any further policy decision in respect of a matter that has been paused by order of court.
Right.
And of course, one of the lawyers raised all that today for the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court advised that they should take necessary action.
What would be the necessary action
that's left in this case?
Now,
they know what to do.
Without conceding,
yes.
In the event that there is contempt, whether on the part of the federal government or the Central Bank of Nigeria, what are the options before the Supreme Court in terms of punishment of the contemptuous party?
Again, I would avoid speaking directly on the matter that is pending in court. But generally speaking, if an order of court is made and anybody is doing anything contrary to the order of court, it raises a lot of issues. One of them is the fact that you run very serious risk of being cited for contempt, and some persons may go to jail, depending on the person who is directly supervising. So, at the end of the day, we're all advised. There's nothing. The court is a very responsible institution. So, if the Supreme Court says that you should hold on while matters should remain in status quo ante, there's no compelling reason why you should continue to act contrary to the order of the Supreme Court. And I don't think anybody should be encouraged to do that, because there's absolutely. I've asked questions. I'm not an economist.
Right.
I've asked the economists, what is the compelling, situation if for instance, you are not complying with the Supreme Court? And all expert view seem to point to the fact that nothing, would the heavens will not drop against us if the Supreme Court order to say pause while we consider all the other
and that's why Nigerians were excited when the Supreme Court came with that interim injunction for a country that is going into a general election 10 days from today.
Yes.
And now we've seen that people are incensed. They've gone out there, poured out onto the streets,
yes.
and they're causing mayhem,
yes.
Which shouldn't be. And so what should now be the urgent case for us as a country to ensure that what the Supreme Court has already gifted the country
yes.
to, by that interim injunction, which means by no small measure, pause, so that we can maintain the peace.
Yes.
So how do we continue to maintain the peace in the face of some skirmish?
Yes, of course, the security agencies have to do the needful of protecting everybody, but we'll come back to the federal government and its agents. They have to comply. It's just as simple as that. There's no if or but.
So in this case, the CBN has to comply.
Of course, it has to comply. So, if you look at, just a moment,
right.
If you look at section 23, which is actually an issue, the order, the power to redesign or call in, currencies is basically it's a presidential power. It's not a power of the CBN, so that the CBN can even act if not directed by the president. Oh. So effectively, it's the president that has directed that action should be taken, and the elementary law is that when a principal has been brought to court, an agent, you don't need to even talk about an agent. So in effect, it is the president, the attorney general in tow, that ought to be taking all the necessary action to ensure that the CBN complies. That's a purely administrative issue, and it shouldn't pose any difficulties for anybody.
So the question of jurisdiction for the Supreme Court does not arise. Is that what you're saying? And I'd also like you to address the point being made that the governors should withdraw the case and settle out of court. Well, is that an option? Is that something you would advise?
It's always encouraged, matters like this, that since like our very, very senior colleague, Godwin, Kanu Aga BSN, he was talking about that. It's a matter that affects all. Let's set aside legalism for a moment. This affects everybody. And as such, there's really no question of, adversaries here. We are talking about a national interest. And so the best course, if you ask me, will be for all parties to come together and work out a more decent way out of this crisis. However, the matter is before court. And I'll come back to the idea that whenever a matter is before court, nobody should take any action that would be adverse to the final determination of that matter. And since the Supreme Court has, in its wisdom, asked that matters should be paused, so be it. So it's a two-way thing. Right. Before 22 February, when the matter is adjourned, parties can take steps to see how they can settle out of court.
The question of jurisdiction,
everything has to be paused.
The question of jurisdiction, does it even arise at all with the Supreme Court, looking at this case? Well,
again, that goes into the substance of the matter. Of course, in every matter, jurisdictional questions can be raised. In fact, it's fundamental and foundational. Any matter that comes before court, questions of jurisdiction often get to be raised. So I will not be surprised if parties are raising issues of jurisdiction and addressing them. But that again goes to the substance of the issue, and I will refrain from discussing it.
Edoba Omoregie, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, many thanks for speaking with us.
Thank you very much.